Hi, everybody, and thank you for being here on time. Please remember to put your phone on silence and vibrate so that it does not disturb the class. Last week, we began chapter 7, and I've noticed that I met with lots of resistance about a central focal point in Judaism. So what I did is I traveled to Rambam, Maimonides. Thank God it's being translated. Otherwise, if I would read, I'm not sure if you'd believe that I read what the text says. And I would like to read from chapter 3, most of chapter 3 of Ilchot Deot, the laws of proper understanding. Rambam is codified the entire Jewish law, 14 books. They include all 613 commandments with all the details. He categorized them by subjects and then in details. This is in the first book. We just started 10 days ago. We started from the new cycle. I think I spoke about it on a Sunday. And this is right at the beginning. So I studied it about less than a week ago. I will read it and then we'll see how it is affecting what we have studied and will be studying today. This is chapter 3. The following is from Maimonides. A person might say, since envy, desire, and pursuit of honor and the like are a wrong path and drive a person from the world, I should separate from them to a very great degree and move away from them to the opposite extreme. It's not, God don't want you to envy, to have pleasures, to enjoy life, and always look after fun. So let's go to an extreme. Let's climb up into the Himalayas and find a cave and hide in the cave and be a vegetarian. For example, he will not eat meat, no drink wine, no marry, no live in a pleasant home, no wear fine clothing, but rather wear sackcloth and coarse wool and the like. Just as the pagan priests do, let me be simply a Nazarite to celibacy. Don't need to interact with other people. The opposite gender is very difficult. You need to learn how to. Don't have to have fancy clothes, because if I buy fancy outfit, everybody is looking up to me. Oh, don't need to drive cars. I would walk or hitch rides, or take the bus, etc. And I can live in a tent. If it's cold, I wear another blanket. Says the Maimonides, this too is a bad path, and it is forbidden to walk upon it. In that path, it is forbidden, it's a sin. Whoever follows this path is called a sinner, as implied by the statement in Numbers concerning a Nazarite. I'm going to summarize this. Anybody heard the word Nazarite? Nazarite is a man who abstained from wine, partying, and cutting of his hair. He has to grow his hair. He's not allowed to come into cemetery, come in contact with dead corpse. When the time had concluded for the Nazarite, he has to bring a sin offering. Sin offering, even though he sanctified himself, he's not going to go party, he's not going to drink, he's not going to make his hair looks good. For the reason is the Torah tells us not enough. God gave you restrictions. You come to God and tell him you can do better, you are smarter. It's considered a sin. Therefore, our sages directed men to abstain only from those things which the Torah denies them, and not to forbid himself permitted things by vows and oaths, etc. So if God says not kosher food, not for you. Kosher food, if you abstain from kosher food, you actually is considered a sin. Thus our sages had stated, are not those things which the Torah has prohibited sufficient for you, that you must forbid additional things to yourself? So this is the introduction in chapter 3. This general statement also refers to those who fast constantly. They are not following a good path. When I was young, whenever I had strong desires, if I fast, it comes down the desires. Literally, it takes away the energy, the passion, the heat. However, Rambam Maimonides says it's not acceptable. I'm not going to go into details when and the exceptions, but it makes it clear that fasting for the sake of serving God is not necessarily proper. Our sages have forbidden a man to mortify himself by fasting. Of all the above and the like, Solomon directed and said, do not be overly righteous and do not be overly clever. Why make yourself desolate? In Ecclesiastes. So far, so good. I don't have to explain anything. Harry, we're at the same page? What?
Is the reason why you've gone to my mind?
Yeah, because I'm going to show with you Jewish law. This is an introduction to the point I want to make. We're going to get there. A person, and it is to the heart of what I wanted to bring up. A person should direct his heart and the totality of his behavior to one goal, becoming aware of God, blessed be He. The way he rests, rises, and speaks should all be directed to this end. For example, when involved in business dealings or while working for a wage, he should not think solely for gathering money. Rather, he should do these things so that he'll be able to obtain that which the body needs: food, drinks, a home, and to support a wife. Similarly, when he eats, drinks, or engages in intimate relations, he should not intend to do these things solely for pleasure, to the point where he will eat and drink only that which is sweet to the palate, and engage in intimate relations for pleasure. Rather, he should take care to eat and drink only in order to be healthy in body and limb. So the purpose of eating, drinking, intimate relationship is for health, for the sake of preserving the body. Now, therefore, he should not eat all that the palate desires, like a dog or a donkey. Rather, he should eat what is beneficial for the body, be it bitter or sweet. Conversely, he should not eat what is harmful to the body, even though it is sweet to the palate. So far, so good. Now I'm going to skip. I'm going to get to the end, to the point I want to. He's going to talk about how healthy it will be if we do it for God's sake, because then we're not going to eat to fill our stomach as long as the palate enjoys, but we eat because it's healthy. So it affects our health. But the point that is important for us is totally different. A person who accustoms himself to live by the rules of medicine does not follow a proper path of this sole intention is that his entire body and limbs be healthy, and that he has children who will do the work for and toil for him. Rather, he should have the intent that his body be whole and strong, in order for his inner soul to be upright, so that it will be able to know God. For it is impossible to understand and become knowledgeable in the wisdom when one is starving or sick, or when one of his limbs pains him. Similarly, one should intend to have a son or children with the hope that perhaps you will be a wise and great man in Israel. Thus, whoever walks in such a path all his days will be serving God constantly, even in the midst of his business dealings, even during physical intimacy, for his intent in all matter is to fulfill his needs so that his body be whole to serve God. Even when he sleeps, if he retires with the intention that his mind and body rest, lest he take ill and be unable to serve God because he is sick, then his sleep is serving his service to the omnipresent, blessed be he. On this matter, our sages have directed and said, and all you did should be for the sake of heaven. This is what Solomon declared in his wisdom, know him in all your ways, and he will straighten your paths. And that's the end of chapter 3. According to Rambam, serving God is not only praying and study Torah, serving God is sleeping. Serving God is having a relationship. Serving God is living in a comfortable house. Serving God is eating, as long as the intent was done for the right reason. Harry, do you understand that? Okay, thank you. Now we can go back to the Kabbalah of this idea. So Rambam, and by the way, Code of Law says the same thing, it's just that I study Rambam. Rambam makes it clear that in order for a person to serve God, if the intention, two people are eating the same piece of meat, two people are partying at the same time, two people are living in a home, the same home. One is doing it because he wants to have a healthy body and mind, so he's able to communicate with people, preserve his body properly. The other person is doing it just to show off to the neighbors, and only because he has to prove a point to his family how successful he is. One is actually walking away from God, the other is serving God. This is the core of Judaism. Judaism is against going away from the universe and hiding in a place, practicing celibacy, because that means we have no opportunity to serve God. Now comes the Kabbalah and goes deeper behind the scene to explain to us what happens and why. In a summary of what we studied thus far, because if you need some help in refreshing your mind, you can go to YouTube. It's all there. We have 3 levels of souls. A godly soul, a nuga soul. Nuga, as I said, is parv. It's not dairy, it's not meat, it's not positive, it's not negative. And then you have 3 unclean shells, 3 unclean souls. I've explained to you that the 3 unclean, because the first one away from the godly soul is not good and not bad, there is only one. There is only one level, outside godliness. And that's the core that we need to concentrate today. Anytime it's not done for God's sake, if I drink this coffee and it's not so I have the energy to study Torah, it goes away from godliness. How far it's from godliness, it doesn't matter. It's outside the building. It's outside the door. So there's only one. When it comes to forbidden behavior, there are 3 levels. They all are forbidden. As we'll discover, the word forbidden in Hebrew means tied or bound, that they cannot elevate themselves and become holy. And there are 3 different levels. There are some that are bound in a way that it's easy to release. There are some bound that it's impossible for forever. As we'll discover at the end of chapter 7, he is bringing examples, extreme examples that no matter what a person does, he will never be able to, so to say, repair. And there is another one that is forbidden, but with a lot of hard work, you can release. That's why there are 3 levels. I explained to you that God, it's not we studied it before, it's not an interference with God. Just like the sun shines everywhere, even to a bathroom or a filthy place. The filth does not prevent from sun ray to reach. God is everywhere. It's not a contradiction. God created it. God created it for so to say, an obstacle so that we overcome the obstacle to prove our connection to God. So it's not fighting forces against God. Back to our discussion. We studied before about the forbidden, we studied before the 3 unclean klipot. That's chapter 6. Chapter 7, we talk about the nuga, the one in the middle. So why is it klipa? Why is it a shell? Simply because it's not for God's sake. Anytime we are engaged of any activity where we have an opportunity to make it holy, if I engage in a conversation, if I am taking a walk, crossing the bridge, if I'm buying a car, if I'm buying a mattress, and I say to myself, I want to preserve my body. I want to be able to communicate with people. I want to be able to make sure that I'm a happy man, healthy body. I'm serving God. If I do it for any other reason, it's not for God. Is it a sin? It's not a sin because you didn't steal the money. You did not give them a bad check. We assume that everything is legal. Therefore, everything is proper. However, it's not holy. So that energy in the act or the object are not godly. It will make it much easier to elevate it, as we'll discuss hopefully in this chapter, but it's not holy. Is that clear so far? Now we can see it in Rambam. How Rambam says that you can serve God in all your ways. In all your ways, meaning not reading Hebrew and not praying. All your ways is driving to work. All your ways is maintaining your car. All your ways is taking out your spouse for dinner or buying a birthday gift. That's the way you serve God, if you do it for God's sake. Is that clear so far? I'm going to tell you stories tonight, because I figured this is a little bit, as I was told, a comment that this is too esoteric, so we have to mix in some fun. The first story that relates to this is that the Baal Shem Tov had a student. Baal Shem Tov is the founder of the Chassidic movement. He lived about 300 years ago. He had a student 275 years ago. The Baal Shem Tov student asked him, he wants to know full well how to serve God while you are eating. Eating is a very physical, mundane activity that we all engage in all the time. How can you serve God when you eat? So the Baal Shem Tov told them, travel to a very far, he told them a name of a village, find a person by that name, and ask to stay in his house for a couple of days. He will teach you how to serve God while you're eating. So he comes to that village, you search for the name, he figured this man must be a holy man, because if you serve God while you're eating, it means everything else is taken care of and you're serving God every other way. And he discovers that this man is a simple man, not even frequently seen in synagogue, doesn't know how to study, doesn't read Hebrew, but he's a Chassid, so he follows the Rebbe's directive. So he introduces him, he knocks on the door, introduces himself, and he says, the great Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, sent me. Oh, did you hear about him? He says, yeah, I heard about this rabbi. He says, is it possible for you to spend 2 days by you? If you need, I'll pay you. If you just give me a little bit hay, I'll sleep on the corner. And the man said, sure, why not? You're part of the tribe. So he realizes the man is eating very, very well. He has a big fat steak every night. He is having for cereal an entire box of cereal. He is eating and eating and eating, and it shows. He's a very strong man. Can't hide it. And he's wondering, I mean, the guy is eating for a whole table of Hasidim. The guy is eating in one sitting. After 2 days, he turned to the man and he says, I've witnessed. He didn't tell him the reason he came. He just was a guest, or he paid him. He says to him, I've witnessed that you eat a lot. Is there a particular reason, or just that's the way you're raised? So the man says, no, let me tell you why. My father escaped the Inquisition in Spain. And the way he was able to escape, I don't know if you know, the Inquisition was until the 19th century. Anybody knows what the Inquisition is? Yeah. Spanish Inquisition, that they chased Jewish people and forced them to convert to Christianity. And if someone, God forbid, was found, they would torture them to death. There is a Wrigley's, believe it or not, museum show in Orlando, and they have on display some of the tools that Mr. Wrigley's brought from Spain that was used in the Inquisition to stretch a human being, to twist and kill an arm, to detach. Unbelievable. And I'm pretty sure that every Jew that lives alive today, one of his parents, one of his great-grandparents have suffered from it. So it's an experience. It says, so the Inquisition went on until I think the last one they put on the stake was 1840. It's an arbitrary number, huh? 1948, 1848. Thank you very much. I wasn't that far. 1848. So this man said, my father escaped the Inquisition. And the reason he escaped is because he was a very strong man. He was able to overcome all their torture and all the pain they inflicted on him. All his friends that weren't as strong gave up. They died. He was able to sustain all the pain and suffering and escape. So on his deathbed, he told me, son, I want you to eat very, very well all the days of your life. So God forbid if the Inquisition is coming to your town, you should be able to overcome all the pain and suffering and to sanctify God's name and to refuse to obey the requests. So I eat every day as much as I can, just thinking, what if tonight they are coming into town? And that Chassid got the point. And that's when he said, thank you very much. Here is the final pay. And he left out. The idea of what the intention, and that's my goal is to inflict on you, is that even though in Judaism, action is all about what Judaism is about, as we discussed, I believe, last week in detail, the intention is what takes the action and elevates that to make it holy. That man ate steak that was just as he likes it, rare, medium rare, and he had all the condiments, and he made sure it's covered with mustard and ketchup, and it tastes very, very good. But he said to himself, I'm going to go buy that food, and I'm going to make sure I eat very well so I can sanctify God if the time is I would be called to. And just for that, all his life, he was holier than anybody else in his village, even though he didn't attend synagogue. One more story. The Alter Rebbe, which is about 75 years later, had a Chassid by the name of Reb Pinchas Shik. Pinchas Shik. He was well known as a Chassid that was very wealthy, and he supported the Rebbe. He had a lot of money. One day the Rebbe found out that he built himself a house made of real stones. Now in Russia, 220 years ago, most of the homes in the villages were made of clay, of dirt, of mud. And if you had wood, you build it from wood. But from stones or bricks, I think not bricks, but real stones, you have got to be very wealthy, and it's a sight to be seen. So when he visited the Rebbe turned to him and he says, Reb Pinchas, I heard that you are taking the pleasure of building yourself a fancy home made of stones. It's not enough that God had granted you so much success that you're able to support and everybody knows your name. Now you have to enjoy it even further to have a fancy, fancy house. So Reb Pinchas turned to the Rebbe and he said, you know, Rebbe, I didn't do it for myself. Actually, with every piece of stone that was placed on the wall to make the walls, the external walls from stone, I washed it with my tears. The reason I built this house so fancy, the nicest, the strongest house in the village, is because it affords a community meetings in my house. There is no other meeting place, hall, big enough like I have in my house. So every time the community wants to have a meeting, they always say, Reb Pinchas, there is no roof leaks, and the wind will not blow into the house, and it's very solid, and there is big room, and it's warm. And they come to my house for a meeting. And guess what? When I have something to say, they all listen. So I have an opportunity to stick in about helping a fellow Jew. This Jew is losing a house. The another one's son is sick. Let's find funds for him to help. Everybody is quiet and listening to me. Imagine, he says, that the meeting would take place in the synagogue where I'm not the host. Then as soon as I open my mouth, they'll say, oh, he's a Chassid. Who cares about what he says? And the Rebbe turned to him and says, you know what? This is the right way, and you actually are serving God with the house to build. And that's the lesson from, the Rebbe says to him, if so, you should have, and you got my blessing for the fancy house you live in. So I hope that you got the message. Now let's go into studying a little bit, and I have more stories. You love the stories, huh? Maybe we should close the book and start.
It's allowed.
That's 3 years ago.
So I don't want to read again chapter 7 because we studied it last week, the part of chapter 7. What the rabbi is saying, that any time I do something, engage in behavior or activity, which is not forbidden, it's not constitute a sin, but it's not done for God's sake, it is tied, it is captured by the nuga shell, and therefore it does not elevate itself. However, says the Rebbe, there is, even if it's necessary for the body, the Rabbi is saying, even if this, the need of the body, food, shelter, so to say, the body needs it, but it does not have the proper intention, it goes down to the nuga shell. That's one part. The second part we studied was, I'm going to continue reading just the last part that we studied last week. Page 116 on the bottom. The Alter Rebbe now provides an example of a neutral action or utterance that is derived from Klipat Noga and can thus be utilized for either good or evil, demonstrating how the action or word itself becomes holy when its motivation is for the sake of heaven, and how it is degraded to the level of the 3 completely unclean klipot if prompted purely by physical desire. And the rabbi gives an example. For instance, if one eats fat beef and drinks spiced wine, not out of physical desire, but in order to broaden his mind for the service of God and for his Torah, as Rabbi said, wine and fragrance make my mind more receptive. And that's where we ended up last week. I shared with you that Rava he was asked a question, he answered a question, then he went out for lunch. His wife knew how important for him to have a very, very good full meal. And then he came back and he says, the answer I gave you was wrong. It's recorded in the Talmud, by the way. The answer I gave you is wrong. Here is the new answer. And the students asked him, how come you change your mind and suddenly you disagree with the previous answer? And he says, simply because I had no lunch. I didn't eat yet. After I ate and I drank good wine, my mind opened up. I was able to think deeper and get to the core of the issue and be able to give you the right answer. In other words, the meat helped him serve God because he was able to study Torah better. Or in order to fulfill the commandment to enjoy the Shabbat and the festivals. In the latter case, regarding Shabbat, his eating and drinking are not merely the means to a spiritual end, as in the previous example. In the previous example, he eats meat and drink wine so he can study better Torah. That's not in Shabbat. And Shabbat, says the Rebbe, but are a mitzvah in themselves, for we are enjoined to enjoy the Shabbat and festivals through eating meat and drinking wine. On Shabbat, there is a mitzvah to eat and drink. And therefore, it's not a mean to an end. It's not serving a purpose. It is the purpose to enjoy Shabbat, to eat good meal, stay a little late in the morning in the bed, sleep late. Those who have been to synagogue last week, I spoke about the difference between the pleasure of Shabbat and the joy of holiday. Each one is a requirement and a mitzvah on every Jew for Shabbat and holidays. Oneg Shabbat, oneg in Hebrew means pleasure. We're supposed to derive pleasure by serving God through pleasure. One way is through consumption of good, tasty food. Another one is by proper dressing. I explain that staying in bed a little longer, not being busy with the day-to-day activities and business, but rather spend time with family, etc. That's how we celebrate Shabbat. So on that day, as long as the food is kosher, as long as the activity is proper, whatever brings desire, without violating Shabbat, we serve God with that. There was the Rebbe, the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe once told the Chassidim that on a weekday, when you have a plate with a meal that your wife cooked for you, it belongs to Klipat Nuga. It all waits for your action. As soon as you stick the fork into it, there is a potential for it to go down to the 3 unclean klipot. Because if I take it into my mouth for the sake, just for gluttony, just because I want the pleasure, because I lust for that piece of meat or salad or whatever it is, then what I did was I lowered it down to the 3 unclean klipot. So before, when it was on the plate, it was just there in nuga. It can be holy, it can be unholy. When I stuck it into my fork, when my fork lifted it, now there is a potential for it to go down. The rabbi is going to talk about how to remove it from the 3 unclean klipot, but right now we need to, the concentration is at this point. Any questions so far? No questions. Everything is clear? Good. There was a the first Chabad yeshiva was established about 105 years ago in Russia. My great-grandfather was one of the first 10, the first in a town called Lubavitch in White Russia. My great-grandfather, I'm named after him, he was one of the first 10, and each one of the 10 became a major macher, major important figure within the Chabad movement. So one day, the Rebbe, he appointed, by the way, his son, who later became the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, was the one in charge of the yeshiva when it's established. One day he was walking and he saw how the students, they had to go for lunch to another place. The building of the yeshiva where they studied wasn't big enough to accommodate for a dorm and for the kitchen. So for lunch, they would take a walk and they had to cross a river over a bridge. And during summer, one time he walked by, or he was not far, he saw the student on the way for lunch. They stopped, they took off their clothes, and they went swimming in the river for 15 minutes. And then they got up, they dried out, there was no towels then, and they got dressed up and they continued for lunch. And the Rebbe was very happy. He told his son, with those 15 minutes of swimming, they enabled their body to communicate with God in a much greater level. Because if they don't do exercise, what will happen? They'll get sick. They'll get tired much faster. They won't be able to study Torah. Years later, they moved the yeshiva to another town called Shtetsedrin. It's a town in Russia. And when they came to the Rebbe asking to move, the Rebbe said no, because there is no river for summer months for the students to swim. Now we're talking about 100 years ago. This was so far from what mainstream, not just Judaism in the universe. He refused to allow for it only when they assured him that there is a river outside of town, and there is, so to say, a natural swimming pool, a natural pool where it's safe and it's private enough for them to go swimming. He accepted to move it to that town. They moved it to that town, and every summer they would go swimming every day. They had the time. They made time for them to go swimming. I know that when I was in yeshiva in Israel as a young boy, there was not enough money. There was no money. The yeshivas did not have money. I'm not going to go into graphic details, but there was no money. And one day we complained, I was one of them, but there was a bunch, 10 boys complained that the yeshiva, the back is very hard. The chairs were all hard wood and a hard back, although it was in a kind of a swivel or a circular, but it was very uncomfortable. And we went to the dean of the yeshiva and said that it's not comfortable. After a while, we sit in yeshiva for 11 hours a day. It hurts. So we thought we will need to have a major rebellion. He said, let me bring it up to the man in charge of the finances, the one in charge of the property. When he brought it back, he came to us back a week later. He says, the one in charge says right away to fix it and to work on it, because years back there was a similar issue, and the rabbi, the yeshiva said, who cares, we have no money, that's the church where we can afford. And they wrote to the rabbi that their back hurts. And the rabbi turned to the yeshiva and says, how dare you allow yeshiva boys to study Torah while their back is hurting? Because if their back is hurting, they can't concentrate. So the dean of the yeshiva accepted our complaint, so to say, and they changed the chairs. Even though it was at the cost is not just prohibitive, there was no money. Yet they knew that if we say that the back hurts, they need to do something about it, and they actually did something. And then, okay, I'll skip that story. I'll have to, okay, here is the story. All right. One more story. I have plenty more. That's why you come to study. I want you to enjoy it. The following is a story of a Jew, a Satmar Chassid from Borough Park, who is still alive. I know his name. Satmar is very much opposing Chabad. I don't want to get into these discussions, but there was a very bitter rivalry. And so it went to physical. However, today, in the last 10, 15 years, they gave up. They saw the Chabad is the path, and everybody's Chabad today. They all go to the Ohel to pray. They all are supporting Chabad. We have Satmar Chassidim who come here. But in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, is because I remember it from the 80s, was a very bitter rivalry. One Chassid from Satmar used to study Tanya with a Chabad Chassid, Rabbi Chaim, which is the most advanced Chassid. He had a phenomenal memory, and he knew Torah better than, he was very close to the Rebbe. He used to teach Tanya once a week in Borough Park. And this Chassid, because Tanya is universal, those who fight Chabad, those who hate Chabad, there is nothing they can say about Tanya. So you'd come to study Tanya just for discovering Torah. There is no other place you can find what we study here. One day, Rabbi Chaim, the teacher, said, next week is a special holiday, and the Rebbe will have a Farbringen. Why don't you come to the Farbringen to hear words from the Rebbe directly? The Satmar Chassid said to himself, I'm studying already for 2-3 years, so I'll go and send one time. He walks in, this is what he tells. He walked into the room. There are thousands of Chassidim men standing together, 4,000. He walked in the middle. He didn't come in earlier at the start. And he says, as he walked in, the Rebbe in Yiddish told a joke. He told something funny, and everybody burst in laughter. And he got very angry. He says, the Rebbe is supposed to be a mentor who teaches Torah. And instead, he's telling jokes. He's making them laugh. It's not for me. And he walked away. This was the only time that he came to a Farbrengen and he walked out. 20 years later, there was a large group of people who returned back, Baalei Tshuva, returned back to Judaism, and they came to Borough Park. They came from other states to Borough Park to experience Shabbat in Borough Park, and they were spread. They don't stay in a hotel, because if you stay in a hotel, you miss the experience of Shabbat. You want to stay with a family. So he volunteered to host a couple. And on Friday night, they sat down for Shabbat meal. He asked the couple to share how do they got connected to Judaism. And the wife said that actually she was invited for one Shabbat to Crown Heights, and Shabbat afternoon she went to a Rebbe's Farbrengen, and when she walked in, she did not speak Yiddish, the language the Rebbe spoke, so she had no idea it's Shabbat. There was no translators. During the week, you have a transistor. You can put in your French, Russian, Hebrew, Spanish, English. They were immediately, but not on Shabbat. And she said to herself, she felt very strange. But then the Rebbe told a joke. And when the Rebbe told a joke, she cannot explain, but she had no idea what the Rebbe is saying, but she burst in laughter together, because laughter is contagious. So she laughed. When it ended, she said to herself, now it makes me feel like part of these people. And she changed her attitude. And she says, the laughter, the Rebbe, this is what she tells that man. The Rebbe is telling a funny story, making people laugh, is what make me decide that these are my people and I have to connect. And that changed my path forever. He says that that's when he felt he has to ask for forgiveness from the Rebbe. And he asked forgiveness from the Rebbe. He realized that the laughter of the Rebbe is actually changes lives. Because before they study Tanya, they really think like an average person, which is, you want to serve God? Pray to God. You want to serve God? Study Torah. Chabad, the Tanya tells us, you want to serve God? Be happy. Be there for people. Enjoy good meal. Build a nice house. And go to work. But do it all with an ethical behavior, in a way that you impress upon people that we are kind people and we are serving God. In that way, we serve God throughout our life. And we don't need to find those few moments when we study and pray. Now let's continue. So the rabbi gave us two examples where we can elevate the food. One is if the meat or the wine is for the purpose of opening up my mind so I can study Torah better or teach better or connect with people better. The other one is on Shabbat, where it's for the purpose of serving God, to enjoy the Shabbat. I'm reading on page 117. When one eats and drinks in the above-mentioned manner, then the vitality of the meat and the wine, which originated in Klipat Nuga, is then extracted from the evil and ascends to God like a burnt offering and sacrifice. That is the life force of Klipot Nuga that the food and drink contain is absorbed in sanctity. The rabbi is saying you can bring an offering to God. You take meat, you take wine, you take good food. It's not necessarily meat. any type of food, and you say, thank you, God, you didn't steal it from anybody, you didn't rob a bank to pay for it. It was all ethical behavior before you obtained it. And you say, thank you, God, for providing it for me. And I am enjoying it. I'm benefiting I'm eating it for the benefit. So I have a healthy body to serve you, or to be able to live a good quality of life. I'm serving God. Not only I am serving God, but I take that piece of food, meat, vegetable, and I bring it as an offering to God. This is how we bring sacrifices to God when the temple is not there. We are the temple. I am the altar. However, let's remember, soon we'll discuss this. If it's not done with the proper intention, what happens? We lower it down to the impure place. So too, concerning speech, the vitality of words spoken for a sacred purpose ascends and is absorbed in sanctity. For example, he who makes a humorous remark to sharpen his mind and to make his heart rejoice in God and his Torah and service, which should be practiced joyfully. There is one rule about serving God. Serve God with joy. Joyfully. You see it, it's written in Hebrew on top of the ark. It's above all. Anyone who serves God because he's forced, or because he has no choice, or but that's the only way to earn people's respect, perhaps there is no purpose. They're not serving God. It's actually, we're going to read in this week's portion, the curses, and God says it's because you serve God without joy. Serve God joyfully is the prerequisite for serving God, and therefore telling a joke, being a little bit funny and humorous, not too much, and not X-rated, and not black humor, and not degrading other people, then it's done for God's sake, and it will be a great mitzvah. As Rava wanted to do with his pupil, prefacing his discourse with a humorous remark, whereupon the students became cheerful and thereby more receptive and better able to understand this discourse. I can tell you that in my yeshiva, in my years, studying was very difficult. I've never had a teacher start with a joke. It's not like that. Today, people, the speakers or those who teach you how to speak publicly, say you have to start with a joke. We have a past president who had started, every time he made an announcement, it was a joke. I tried, but I realized it's very dangerous. Sometimes if you repeat the joke that you said 25 years back, somebody says, I heard it. So I gave up on that. But Rava would not start a teaching, a lesson, without telling them a joke. He would say to the students, that's what opens up your mind. Today, all great speaker or speaking speaker, all those who teach you how to speak will tell you that's the first 20 minutes or 45 minutes of a speech is when you're going to either capture the crowd or lose it. And if you tell a joke, you open up the mind. So Rava was the first one. He would start with a joke, but after that, he would raise his stick and he would say, dare you not concentrate on the study. So he would make it very clear that it's not about having fun, it's about studying. However, to open up the mind, he did use humor, and therefore that humor is part of studying Torah, is part of serving God. When humorous remark is made with this intent, the vitality of the words which originates in Klipat Nuga is extracted from the evil of Klipat Nuga and is absorbed in sanctity. Says the Rebbe, humor is not holy, so it's in Klipat Nuga. But if you use it to open up your mind so you can study, so you can have an open mind to listen to people, to connect with your spouse, to be able to have patience for your children or parents, that's when you are elevating it to make it holy. one more story. So that, because I don't want to get to the next topic. Now the rabbi is talking about what happened when it's done, not done for the right sake. It's a very short story. The fourth Lubavitch Rebbe had been married. He actually lost his wife at a very young age. I think today I told you that this Rebbe got married before his bar mitzvah. His wife died when he or she was 14. But later on, at the age of 17, I think he remarried. When that Rebbetzin, that lady, was 18 years of age, she wasn't well. And they brought in a doctor, and the doctor says something with the heart, that there is no cure. He cannot take care of her. And she went to her father-in-law. Father-in-law was the third Lubavitch Rebbe, very famous Rebbe. And he told her, the Torah tells us that God granted permission to doctors to cure, but not to give bad news. So perhaps he's not the one to cure you. I am going to help you. And he gave her a eating regimen. He told her that every morning when she wakes up, she must eat bread and drink milk right out when she wakes up. So she first accepted it. She said it's hard. Then after a while, the Rebbe, the father-in-law, discovered that it actually caused her more harm than help. Why? Because she was a holy person. She was righteous. She wouldn't eat bread before you pray to God. In the morning, you're not allowed to eat before you pray to God. I am not allowed to eat. I do not eat. I only eat cake or drink coffee, which is also debatable. Some Jews, when they see, there was a man here that very observant Jew, saw me once on Shabbat eating a candy bar, an energy bar. And he was kind of shocked. He was very shaken. He says, before prayer. We Chassidim, as the story will illustrate, this is the story that changed. But the code of law is debating whether we're allowed to eat anything. According to the code of law, by the way, when I studied that with you last year, it says that coffee you can drink, but with no sugar. And tea you can drink with no milk. Do you remember that we studied? You're allowed to eat. I eat cake every morning and coffee. However, I do not eat cereal or a meal. You're not allowed to. So what does she do? She wakes up 45 minutes earlier so she can pray quick, so she can have the meal at the same hour she used to wake up every day. What it did was, not only it didn't help her, but also caused her to sleep less than she used to, which was adversely affecting her. When the father-in-law heard about it, he called her back and he said to her, this is a statement that among Hasidim is an iron statement. It's better to eat for the sake of prayer than to pray for the sake of eating. He says to her, the way you pray very quick so that you can end up prayers to eat. So you end up praying for food. How about you eat and you say to yourself, I'm going to eat it, the full meal, because of my condition I need to. So my prayer would be done properly to serve God amidst great tranquility, because after a meal, you're able to concentrate on what I say. So we Hasidim always say, it's better to eat for the sake of prayer rather than to pray for the sake of eating. Because some people, if they don't eat or taste anything in the morning, when they come to prayer, they have to go fast. Why do they have to go fast? Because they're hungry, because they want to eat. So Hasidim reversed that idea. Now, as I said, some observant Jews don't accept that, but Hasidim, those who study Tanya, those who accept the Hasidic teaching, it's very, very clear. So he told her that she must have the same number of hours. She must wake up in the morning, and instead of praying, she must eat, and only then praying. And actually, she gained all her health back, and she lived for a very long life, for very many, many years. But the idea from that point is that eating for the sake of prayer, of course, when it's done with the doctor's directive, otherwise it's forbidden to eat a full meal before prayer. You need to know that. But we're talking about this situation is proper to eat as the doctor instructed you, because then the food is done for a holy purpose. So you serve God when you eat. if you go and pray before for the sake of eating, not the prayer was done proper, not the eating was done proper, you end up losing everything. And that should conclude our lesson for tonight. God willing, next week we will meet again for another lesson.